Easy guys, today I'm taking on the challenge of recreating and thriving as a Xenomorph in SPORE. I've seen a few attempts at this, but to be honest I've always been a little hesitant. I mean, using the creepy and cute parts pack we can make something pretty aggressive looking, that's doable. But that biomechanical, skeletal look and that elongated head, now that's a whole different thing, especially if I'm trying to avoid making some kind of wobbly aubergine. SPORE doesn't really do heads at all, and I don't want to use mods. So, with my questionable SPORE knowledge at hand, I'm diving in head first. Let's see if we can bring this nightmare to life. Our origin starts deep in convoluted Xenomorph lore, with the black goo and a sacrifice, as our engineer's body tumbled into the tide pool. Strange mutations occurred, starting with a small carnivore, unaware of the lurking pathogen which carried the seeds of its own transformation. Mutations silently reshaping it from within. Black skin like polished obsidian, the first traces of a razor-sharp tail, both weapon and shield. Flagella twisting and writhing, propelling it effortlessly through the ebb and flow of the tide as it hunts. This is a lesser-known stage of the Xeno life cycle, the black sausage morph. While impressive hunters, speed was not on our side, leaving us vulnerable to larger predators. We used our cunning and guile to evade our hunters, followed by more Xeno mutations that gave us jets for added speed, and ribbed shapes along its body for added sensual pleasure devastation. Like a spear we penetrated and destroyed, followed by more upgrades, acidic poison sacs, which we used to circle more challenging prey, crippling them and using their bodies to fuel our Xeno onslaught. As time went on, our color lightened to a more yellowish brown, a sign of mutations to come. We continued our growth phase until we had enough nutrients to transform into our next phase of xenoevolution, skipping the egg phase entirely. Our tail grew, and long extendable fingers protruded from our bodies into our facehugger phase. Our poisonous bags developed into air sacs, so we could breathe for our prey as we laid our embryo inside. At first, SPORE didn't understand our legs, or perhaps they were fingers, or hands, leading us to getting stuck in the floor. Once free, we set out into the wild to make friends, by grabbing their faces and inserting our children into their mouths. This went well, and our first offspring were born, with more evolutionary refinements. Some say a spider's walk is one of the reasons people find them so terrifying. Clearly, they haven't seen this entangled nightmare. We stayed hidden under the grass, mindful of more dangerous predators, while we were still small and fragile. Our Xenomorph hive had not yet reached fruition. Our brains grew, and with enough nutrients, we evolved our Xenomorphs into the next phase, a young drone. Our available parts were limited, so I settled on using a thigh from a leg to create the head. Trying to move a single draggable point in 3D space was somewhat tricky, but eventually I got something roughly representing a chestburster, although at this stage with so few parts it looked far from menacing. Here a communal aspect began to shape our society. Our chestburster began hunting in packs, shredding through the local squawky population, spitting out acidic venom onto their offspring. The collective good and survival of the species took precedence over individual members, and as the population grew, our Xenos became progressively bolder. Even when it led to their own demise, the collection of DNA for the collective was paramount. As our minds evolved, we sought a new nesting ground, one teeming with prey. Yet speed remained our weakness, driving the need for further Xeno enhancements. The masticator mouth from the creepy and cute parts pack gave our Xeno a menacing bite, although the extended cheeks weren't quite the look I envisioned. Still, it would suffice for now, and new feet would soon resolve our speed issues. As the colony grew, so did our gang, yet we remained cautious, luring larger predators away from their nests with acid before striking once they were isolated. Survival demanded the elimination of all rival species. Instinct dictated it. With more DNA, we slowly began to morph towards our final form. Our legs fully developed, although our rear legs were missing the additional joint required to be a true Xenomorph drone. I favored the more feral appearance of the runner from Alien 3, giving our Xeno a lower, sleeker appearance. Lone, migrating creatures were perfect prey for our Xenos, eager for food and DNA for yet more mutations. The Wubble and the Modern Gamer were our next victims, courtesy of the Sporepedia, followed by the Smashburger. Our Xenos continued to refine their design. The head was still causing me headaches. I wasn't happy with the mouth, which you must never attach to a leg instead of the body, else weird stuff happens. I needed more parts, more DNA. With a new nest secured and our colony expanding, our growing gang of Xenos clashed with rival species, growing ever bolder. As countless species before us had done, we cleansed the land of competing nests. Despite the repetition, the creature stage was always one of my favourites. There was something oddly therapeutic about wiping out one species after another. After collecting many more parts, our Xeno could evolve into the drone it was always meant to be. We finally found legs with the additional joint we needed. I used various decorations to create the classic Xeno shoulder bone. And again for the pelvis. Their skin became darker and more hardened. Our Xenos were becoming unstoppable, yet their flailing sausage-like tails remained as a lingering relic of their evolution from the tide pool. Still unsatisfied, I turned my attention to the head and mouth, reshaping them using a different leg as the foundation. The black goo had spawned some bizarre mutations, but I persisted like David from Alien Covenant. I would not stop until perfection was achieved. I chose to create a new mouth, a fake one, using horns to shape the jaw and death spikes as crude teeth. I painstakingly aligned them into something semi-convincing. The process was tedious, but the result would be worth it. I then created a bottom jaw using the same method, creating what I believe to be a much more primal Xeno mouth, inset with a masticator inside its fake mouth, not only because it served as an inner jaw from Xeno lore, but it also lets Spore know that this limb was a head, and so we should now have the relevant animations. Despite this, the proportions still seemed wrong to me. After some time, extending the neck and building the forehead, I believed I had what I deemed to be the final Xenomorph form. Adding different parts, while not 100% accurate to Xeno lore, did give the creature more impressive stats in Spore. We are gamers after all. With our Xenos ready, they unexpectedly began building huts and houses, a side effect of the black goo pathogen. Despite our technological advancements in housing, our Xenos were still abundantly equipped to handle the local creatures and fauna. Without the need for advanced weaponry, their acid spit, sharp tails and claws were devastatingly effective, gathering themselves food for the colony. Despite this, our Xenos conceded to use hatchets, and wore gear which enhanced their existing features, such as shoulder pads, to enhance their already large shoulder bones. After gathering a small supply of food, our Xenos reverted to their primal directive: eliminate all potential threats. The first target was a nearby Pavu tribe. Their camp was raided, their food stolen. Unfortunately, Spore didn't allow us to feast on the flesh of our enemies, leaving their bodies to rot under the unforgiving midday sun. After this, it seemed only natural to stove in their village. Why not? And so, the Brown Pavu tribe had their last day on the planet Xenomorph Prime, swiftly followed by the Magenta tribe and the Cyans. Our Xeno villager, one of the lesser-known variants, was heavily outfitted in tribal combat gear and exceptionally skilled in killing. The downfall of the Greens and the Lilacs was inevitable. Despite their technological advancements, they were, after all, just giant rhubarbs. No match for the relentless Xenomorphs. Our Xenos then began building cities. As Xenomorphs didn't care for architecture, they simply made a large shaft with a door on it. Nobody even bothered to paint it a nice colour. They just left it in a flat shade of primer grey, as our Xenos plotted their plans for the rest of the planet. You may be wondering if I made the Xenomorphs a musical motif in the anthem composer, and the answer is no, because in Spore, nobody can hear your theme. The Xenos began constructing powerful tanks, shaped like their elongated, smooth heads. Ah, wait, this is backwards, isn't it? No matter, our reversed alien head was scientifically more aerodynamic going the other way, which is completely ruined by covering it in guns. As such, our tanks were painfully slow, a glaring genetic oversight that had plagued me for this entire playthrough. Using the few tanks we had, I elected to be as hostile as possible, removing any threats before enemy Xeno factions had a chance to build many vehicles. I then filled our conquered cities with other people's buildings, an infusion of the xenopathogen mutating and combining with other cultures. or perhaps after a dozen Spore playthroughs at this point, laziness on my part. The Greens, an economic nation, attempted to trade. We accepted before they were immediately destroyed, as all economic nations do in the Civ stage. With a small defensive force left behind to repel the inevitable counterattack, we turned our attention to the other enemy cities. Once our Xenos had conquered the island, now it was time to take to the skies. The Xenobats, heavily armed but agonizingly slow, were unleashed. From above the water, they began their work, reducing cities to ruins. One by one, the tribes fell until only the Blues remained. Faced with extinction, they surrendered, uniting all Xenomorphs under a single colony. Now the Xenos stood on the threshold of the stars. But that is a tale for another time. Perhaps in the vast silence of the cosmos, another species will one day stumble upon them, only to realize, too late, what they have awakened.